I'm Father Jeffrey Mickler of the Society of St. Paul, a religious congregation in the Catholic Church made up of brothers and priests dedicated to spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ through the use of media. We're currently in 30 countries around the world. In one of my recent travels to Australia, I was invited to speak to a group of adolescents. The priest who invited me said to me, "Father, why not speak to them on what St. Paul was like as a teenager?" Well, this startled me because I had never really thought of that question before. And at first, I thought, we don't know anything about his life as a teenager. But then I began to reflect. We know a lot about Tarsus, his hometown. We know a great deal about what Jewish family life was like in the first century. And we could begin to put together the pieces to see what Paul was going through as a young man. So when I went to speak to these teenagers, as soon as I said St. Paul and his life, I could see their eyes glazing over and their adolescent minds beginning to travel here, there, and everywhere, just as mine did when someone would start speaking about history when I was a teenager. And this brings us to the first point, that over the centuries, from one culture to the next, from one situation to the next, human nature remains pretty much the same. And so my first question to them would be, what did St. Paul think about love, about his future, about his career, about what he wanted to do, how he was going to make his way in the world? These are questions that in their heart of hearts, adolescents struggle with. Many times they begin to panic. They don't want to think about the future. It's too nebulous. So they think of living in the moment with their friends especially in order to enjoy life and not to become too anxiety-ridden. That's understandable. As a teenager myself, my friends and I decided that the ideal age was 16 and we didn't want to grow beyond that. Why? Because at 16 we'd be able to get our driver's licenses. But life forces itself upon us and we have to live in the moment preparing for the future. St. Paul, first of all, owed everything to his parents, life itself. And they would love him and want what was best for him over the long term of his life. And the first thing they would want to share with him was their religious faith in Yahweh, Adonai, El Elohim, the God of Israel, that had saved their people over and over again. And so they would tell Paul the story of salvation, bring him to the local synagogue where these great mysteries would be reflected on and debated. So first and foremost, he had a religious education. But the city of Tarsus also had a great rhetorical school, one of the best in the ancient world. It was ranked up there with Athens and Alexandria. Two of the professors from this school were Caesar Augustus's closest advisors. Cicero, the greatest orator in Latin, also was governor there for a while, perhaps learned from that school and maybe even taught that school a few lessons. It's very likely that Paul either studied at that school or had teachers who did study there. And because of that, he was able to master rhetoric himself. Now, his parents also had a business, tent making. Tarsus was noted for this type of industry because of a particular breed of sheep that produced a wool that was light, water repellent, and excellent for making tents. It was a woolen tent that would be light to carry, easy to use. Other tents made of animal skin or leather or other fabrics would all have their limitations. And this brings us to the point of how did Paul's parents become Roman citizens? No one knows for sure. St. Jerome in the 4th century said that his parents were taken to Tarsus as slaves by the Roman army. Somehow they got their freedom and then managed to become Roman citizens. This seems a little unlikely, although most slaves were released in their mid-30s by their owners because those old fogey slaves were not worth their keep. However, to go from being a freed slave to a Roman citizen was quite a jump. It's more likely, from my perspective, that they lived as free individuals in Tarsus, had a business, and then either purchased their Roman citizenship, which was a common practice, or perhaps earned it. The civil wars that took place between Caesar and Pompey and Octavian and all of the rest swept through that area. And perhaps, it's just a guess, they provided for the Roman armies the tents that they needed and in the process gained their Roman citizenship. And so they passed that on to their son, Paul. This would be a benefit to him and to the family. Now, they would also wish that his life would be dedicated to business and the business they knew, tent making. And indeed, he would carry that craft with him throughout his life, wherever he went, whatever he did. But many young people would think to themselves, there must be more to life than the family business. And this brought him to thinking seriously about his faith, about his religion. Here for Paul would be the key to unraveling the mysteries of life. And because of that, at a certain point, he would ask his parents' permission to leave Tarsus, to leave the family business, and go to study in Jerusalem, just as many Jewish men and women do today. He wanted to get in contact with his roots and to understand what life itself was all about. And there's that hunger for truth and ultimate reality that's in every adolescent heart. Because every adolescent knows only by ultimately facing those questions can our lives be seen as extraordinary rather than ordinary. And when he got to Jerusalem, he managed to sign up with the best rabbi available, Gamaliel. He is rated as one of the top rabbis in history by the Talmud. And at the feet of Gamaliel, he began to absorb the wisdom of the ages. In many ways, his hopes and dreams were being fulfilled, and also the hopes and dreams of his parents, who wanted him to live a holy life according to the traditions of Israel. They no doubt also taught him about love and longed for him to find a nice Jewish girl to marry and to raise a family. Some speculate that he married young, but his spouse died and left him a widower. If this is the case, that is something marvelous for all those who have suffered that way to understand. But if not, he nevertheless became a great lover of God and neighbor as a single person totally dedicated to spreading the truths of the gospel. I hope that you take all of the best wisdom you gained as an adolescent and apply it today in your life and forget all the foolishness. If you do that, your life will be one well worth living. God bless you.